Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Wallis Mills, and this is Modern Enterprise Unpacked. Today, we're diving into one of the biggest shifts in AI infrastructure, the rise of what is being called the NeoCloud. Joining me is Jon Stevens, CEO of Hot Isle. Jon has spent decades making compute more accessible, from the early days of open source to today's GPU-powered AI revolution. In this conversation, we're going to explore how his journey has shaped his mission, why independence matters in a market dominated by giants, and where he sees the future of AI infrastructure heading. Jon, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
So I'm just so curious about your journey. Let's get into it. You've gone from early crypto mining and now you're building this incredible GPU cloud for AI. How has your journey shaped your belief that computing and compute power should be more widely accessible?
Yeah, it's a great question. So my journey actually starts much further back than that. In college in the early '90s, I was in charge of a bunch of computer labs, and I was 18, 19 years old and had multi-million dollar budgets to buy computers. And at the time, I was actually buying Apple computers long before they were popular and long before they're as widely adopted as they are today. So I kind of got an early taste for that alternative compute, right? Not just going down the path that everybody else is going down. And then, kind of more recently, I did get into crypto mining in what was it? It was early 2013, mining Bitcoin, and that grew to mining Litecoin in Vietnam, and then mining Ethereum in the U.S. And so I do have a long history of deploying a lot of compute, not just for myself, but for others, and running and building software solutions to manage compute, and then starting kind of industry things that were very early on in the industry, like Java on a server. I worked to build an open source solution that eventually convinced Sun Microsystems to open source their solution, which was called Tomcat. And this became the reference implementation of what's called a servlet engine, but basically powered the Java on the server and created a whole multi-billion-dollar industry that still exists today. So I've had kind of like a pretty wide career growth, and not a lot of people realize it or know about me because I was always just in the background building companies and working on these things. So, when I was mining with Ethereum, we were mining with AMD chips, and we mined about 150,000, or we deployed 150,000 AMD chips across 7 data centers. And by doing that, I got a real appreciation for how good AMD hardware is. So back in 2023, mining for Ethereum had stopped. We shut down the company, and I was kind of like trying to figure out what I was going to do next. And so I made a bet and basically convinced Joe Lubin, who is the co-founder of Ethereum, that he should invest in myself and my business and deploy some AMD compute and see where it goes. So we adopted this kind of crawl, walk, run method of building the business, where we started with one box of 8 GPUs. And then the whole kind of KPI for that was to prove that we could deploy it and get a customer on it. And we did that very successfully. And so went back to Joe and said, hey, what else, you know, can we get some more money and make it bigger, right? And so we deployed another cluster. We got more money and raised more money from Joe, and we were able to deploy another cluster. And since then, we've been actively just bringing on customers and building our product. And we've made several innovations in the space, namely being the first company to run virtual machines with 1 GPU in it for AMD. And the reason why that's actually really an important feature is that because NVIDIA is dominating the market so aggressively, a lot of people aren't aware of AMD, and they don't know if AMD actually works. And so they don't want to commit to a 3-year contract or a box of or 1,000 GPUs. They really just want one GPU, and they just want to try it out, and they don't want to pay a lot for it. And so we built a product that enables that, enables people to do their proof of concept on our system with no risk, test out AMD, see that it's actually pretty good, and start to build their applications on AMD. And the reason why this is important is because NVIDIA, as the dominant monopoly in the market, which to be very, very clear, they rightly deserve their standing. They've done a fantastic, phenomenal job building amazing products and getting developers to adopt their systems and create that CUDA moat. They've just done a very, very fantastic job of it. But the problem is that this AI thing is such a transformational technology that what happens if a single company is control of all of that? We've seen these monopolies happen over and over again. So yeah, this is virtualization is a really important technology, and so is AI. And so why are we putting all of our eggs in one basket? So that's kind of like where we're approaching things is from the ground up in a very similar fashion as to what NVIDIA has done, where their playbook was to get the compute into hands of developers who would then build applications or AI, I call it AI utility, around their hardware and software platform. And that is why they are number one. So I figure repeat that playbook with AMD, enable developers to, without friction, to rent one or more GPUs for 1 minute at a very reasonable price with no commitment, no lock in, try it out and see if it works. I think that it's really important to understand where we're coming from is not from a point of view of trying to be the biggest and the best. What we're trying to do is build a community around AI and around AMD and foster innovation and foster developers to be able to get access to high performance compute that they weren't able to before. A lot of people call this like democratized compute or decentralized compute. And I think it's really kind of important to adopt both of those. Whereas, decentralized means that anybody can access anything without having to ask for permission. And democratize means make it available to everybody in the same way. And I think it's hugely important mission for the industry because everybody else is going down a different path of only making compute available to the biggest companies with the most amount of money. All of their customers are multi-year contracts, billions of dollars. And I think the little guy, the developer that's, maybe not even in the United States, but in some up and coming country, some kid in a shack somewhere who can, rent a GPU for very, very inexpensive. Maybe they're the ones that are going to come up with the next generation of AI utility or the next killer application, that kind of hidden genius. And I want to enable that. I want to foster that.
I think that's kind of like what drew me to you, and your mission. And one of the things that I've talked to my audience about before is that usually the people who are busy doing the work and who've been at this for a long time, like you said, a lot of people really don't know about you. And so I'm glad that we're having this conversation because the people who have so much value to offer are usually the ones who are just busy, heads down, doing the work and creating opportunities like you are to democratize and decentralize AI. And so we appreciate you sharing your journey with this audience. I just want to double click on something that you mentioned. We know that NVIDIA is, pretty pervasive in the industry.
Yeah.
And I know that you've leaned into AMD and Dell, which are both known for their open architectures. Is I know that your approach is not just in leaning into an alternative. In addition to reaching some of the developers who may not ordinarily have access to AI, one of the things that I've been talking about in the AI bottleneck issue is even for large enterprises who are really trying to figure out spend and infrastructure and how to hedge their bets in this really crazy space. There's an advantage there too for them with NeoCloud in terms of, the pilots and POC. All that being said, can you talk about some of the advantages of open architecture beyond it being an alternative to the monopolization of maybe one large company?
Yeah, that's a great topic to discuss. The thing that AMD is doing differently than NVIDIA is that all of their platform is based on an open source architecture. So ROCm, which is kind of the competitor to CUDA, is available on GitHub. You can file a bug report against it, and AMD will respond. You can tag Anush, who is the VP of AI software at AMD, and he'll respond on Twitter. So AMD is kind of committed to working directly with developers, and this is something that has changed over time. Originally, AMD wasn't a good listener, and now they are morphing their company to be a great listener and really work with their users. This is a critical advantage that AMD has in the industry. When a developer can interact directly with the manufacturer, it creates what's called a developer flywheel, where developers start to write code for a platform, and then they can give they're of course they're going to find documentation that's missing, or code that has bugs in it. This is, and every industry has this, no surprise there. But the real thing is being able to give that feedback back to AMD. And at the end of the day, when AMD gets that feedback and then they work to improve their product, then it works better for everyone. And this is kind of like the selling point of open source, is that it is a collaborative effort, not just for companies that are building their products, but it's a collaborative effort for everybody involved to be able to have a voice in how things are being built and how things are shaping up. And this is really important in the age of AI being such a important technology, just like the internet, right? The internet's built on open source. In order for AI to really gain steam and become this amazing thing that's in all of our lives, it's going to take a giant global collaborative effort to make that happen. That's another reason to pick AMD, right? Now, for Dell, Dell is a great partner because they listen. They have just really nailed over decades and decades the ability to listen to their customers and to work with their customers. And again, it's kind of that flywheel, right? You think of it as just hardware, but the hardware has firmwares, it has integrations with software, all sorts of tooling built around it. If we run into a problem with that, we need to be able to talk to Dell about it. We need to be able to work with them to resolve any issues. And they have developed a really great mechanism to give them feedback. They actually have a team of people that when you do a deployment, they just ensure that everything goes well. And of course, things are going to have problems, but they this team takes that feedback and then they integrate that into their whole product lifecycle as well. So that collaboration, again, even though it's not something that can really be open source, it's something that you really want to work with. And that's why I love Dell as a partner, is anything goes wrong and you know that they have your back. So like you're saying, the big guys, right? If you're doing a proof of concept with the big guys, nobody gets fired for picking IBM, right? But the problem is that the big guys are almost too big. They can't always give that attention to detail, especially for their smaller customers. They can only service the big customers. So I believe that there is a niche market of companies, and I call this kind of the long tail, where, you know, at the top of the tail is all the big companies, and at the very end of the tail is all the developers at these companies, or independently, or even the small companies. And I feel that I can service that long tail of the market very well. And the reason why I can do that is because we've adopted a lot of automation into our own processes. When we did the 150,000, it was really only two of us as the technical team, which is kind of amazing. It's like 7 data centers, keeping them all running. And the only way that that works is to automate everything. So all of our machines that we deployed had a small program running on them that was like built to be kind of smart. So that program could identify and diagnose issues and then figure out how to repair those issues. And it wasn't quite AI because it was very baked into it. It wasn't autonomously figuring stuff out, but it kind of knew the problems, and that was based on my own experience of running this stuff, and then knew how to fix them. So we've done similar things with our automation in this business as well, where we can provision a machine instantly for a customer, or a customer can request one GPU for 1 minute, and that's because we just have software controlling everything. So that creates a more secure system, a more reliable system, and a system that can scale to any size. So most NeoClouds that I've seen, they haven't quite automated a lot of this stuff yet. It's not easy to do. It's actually very, very complicated. So they've taken a different approach, which is to hire more people and become a bigger company, take more funding, um, and spend money on just people to solve these problems. But again, that's a problem in that you're going to have a lot of mistakes made when you haven't automated things. You know, humans make mistakes, and it's very costly that way. So we're intentionally staying small, we're intentionally staying focused. And with that focus, we can service our customers better. We can, instead of spending time deploying compute for somebody else, we can spend that time actually listening to our customers, taking their feedback, passing it up to Dell, passing it up to AMD, and working with our customer more directly. And I think that that's a real difference in the industry and where NeoClouds shine over the hyperscalers. Hyperscalers are like a one size fits all, where we can work directly with the customer and customize things to their needs.
Thematically, we're aligned. That's quite a few things that I've been talking to my audience about. One is the goodness in automation. There's so much goodness there, and I love how you
Yeah.
talked about the advantages that automation is giving you versus, kind of letting things run autonomously, which is a really different equation. I fear that too many people are going to jump over that goodness of automation and into this craze around agentic AI, and
Yeah.
without having gone through all of the things that you probably need to learn in that first step. That kind of leads me to, with a lot of things that you've talked about with the companies that you lean into, AMD, well, the ability to influence the product, and the ability to be heard, and even with the way that you're able to provide very customized and tailored service for your customers, because you have automated things and offloaded the things that can be automated so that you can offer them that level of attention. All of that leads me to trust, which is something that I've been talking to folks a
Yeah.
lot about lately. And I've been talking about how much it's not just a feature or nebulous nice to have. It's actually a design principle, the way that I think about it. And I love, what you said in one of our previous conversations about, like, it's not just a checkbox. It's not a compliance checkbox. And I just wanted to know a little more about how you're addressing trust and security at Hot Isle.
Yeah, so that's a great question too, because our background is we have a lot of crypto background, and crypto is actually trustless, right? You're trusting the code instead of trusting some person in some bank to record something on some ledger somewhere. It's all done with math and code, and it's basic. Bitcoin and Ethereum are effectively trustless solutions to storing value and doing contracts. And so, you know, it's in our ethos to build trustless systems. However, in corporate America, they've they've come up with compliance standards. So you have SOC 2, right, as a trust mechanism. Uh, it doesn't really mean that your systems are secure. There's nothing that can truly make that make that happen. The way that we go about that is that we would if somebody actually wanted to see if our systems were secure or not, we will sign an NDA and walk you through all of our code and our processes and everything else, and prove to you firsthand that we know what we're doing and that we're secure. I think that that's a much better solution than just having SOC 2 placed on your website. Obviously, that's the first starting point, but it's by no means as complete as working directly with us. And that again sets us apart from every other NeoCloud because I don't think other NeoClouds are prepared to show their customers their code base, for example. Like we would be more than happy to do that and show you to prove to you that we are fully secure and fully, it's something that we take very seriously.
I think that says a
Yeah.
lot. It says everything if you're willing to share your code base and be completely transparent and really kind of, let people explore and see, yes, to come
Yeah.
to even their own conclusion in terms of the level of trust and security that's available. And I think it's important too that
Yeah.
people ask these questions and realize that they might need to look a little bit beyond standard compliance standards as they.
I have one other thing to say on that is like a lot of companies will hire what's called a CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, and then that person's role is to check all the boxes, to fill out the SOC 2 forms. And now having gone through it ourselves, and we're just about to get type 2 in a matter of days, to me it's kind of like, well, yeah, there should be somebody that's in charge of watching over these things, but often that person isn't really doing the work that the developers are doing to build the processes behind the scenes that actually are securing the systems. So what we're proposing is that the CISO really needs to be a developer. They can't just be some fractionalized person that comes in and tells people what to do just so that forms get filled out. I don't feel that that role is enough. It needs to be a much deeper integration role with the company. So, being a smaller company, we can offer that low level access to developers, to our processes, to our code base, everything along there.
I think that's so
It's
valuable, and I
important.
think companies that pick that up, they say, "Oh, okay, do we have the right person in the right seat doing the right thing, looking at the right things?" Because it may not show up today, but I think not having someone who's a developer, as you just mentioned, and I didn't even think about this. This is like that's a light bulb moment for me, is if you don't have that person in the right seat now, that's gonna show up down the road. So they may have the impressive resume, they're
Yeah.
coming to C-suite, but do they really understand what's going on inside the box? I love it. But that actually whole issue of trust, brings me to a larger conversation that's been happening. Even last night, I've seen quite a few things coming up in my feed, about, kind of like AI infrastructure and the public at large and their feelings around trust,
Mm.
with hyperscalers and cloud and all the rest. Not that the general public really understands exactly, but they understand that AI infrastructure is becoming an issue. Trust of the public leads me to a sustainability
Yep.
segue here. And your infrastructure, as I understand it, runs on renewable energy. But can you tell me about how you're addressing or how you're balancing AI's demand for power with the need for sustainability?
Yeah. So for us, it's really important. It's always been important to me, especially when I was mining, proof of work, which everybody thinks is a giant waste of electricity. I'm not really going to get into the arguments over that. But even when we were mining proof of work, we were very focused on deploying into data centers that were green, mostly hydropower. And it aligned well because actually that ends up being the least expensive power too. So, you want to go for green. Well, you're going to save money on that anyways. So it's the right thing to do. Now, what's happening today is that AI is demanding so much power so quickly that the grids can't keep up, that the data centers that they need to find power however they can. What a lot of data centers are doing now is that they're buying natural gas turbines and deploying those. And so natural gas is probably better than burning coal, but it's still quite a bad greenhouse gas. So it's we're moving fast, and I think that what's happening, and we kind of saw this with Bitcoin when it started to grow originally, was people would just deploy wherever they could find power, and they didn't really care. So what we've done is a little different. We're working with a company called Switch.com, and Switch is dedicated from day one in their own business to provide green power. And they have scaled their business significantly over the years and focused on that. So it's either green credits or it's renewable power. But because we deploy our compute with them primarily, then we get to take advantage of that. And Switch is by far, I've been in a lot of data centers all over the world, and Switch is by far the best, most professional run organization that I've ever worked with, and I can't speak highly enough of them. And it's everything about their data centers is extremely well thought out, and so I get offers all the time for data center space, and it's actually interesting because a lot of people think that there isn't any space and power, that people are suffering for it. The reality of the situation is that there actually is a lot of power available. The problem is that there's not data centers that can support the power density of AI. So you need to put, a megawatt in a rack. There's like one data center on the planet that can do that. And so it's called basically stranded power, which is power that can't be used for AI because the facilities to host this don't exist. So over time, I think that will change. And I think these facilities will upgrade their infrastructures and that power will be made available or switched to facilities that can use that power. The other thing is that the big deals for power right now are taking up all of the news. So, if you want 30 megawatts, which is actually like an insane amount of investment, it's like hundreds of millions of dollars worth of gear to use up that power. If you wanted something like that, that's a bit more difficult. But if you just need like 1 or 2 megawatts or up to like 5 or 10, it's much easier to find that in data centers today. So it's out there, and I get offers for that all the time. The hard part, though, again, is also making sure that that power comes from renewable energy. So there's a lot of like complexities in the business that I don't think the general public are aware of. But the reality of the situation is that, yeah, there actually is power available. It's just in smaller chunks, and the only people that can deploy into the bigger chunks are the ones that are raising hundreds of millions of dollars to do that. So, yeah, and we're definitely not there yet. So, and I'm
Yes,
more than happy to do the smaller deployments because that's what our customers are focused on.
I think that there's something wonderful about setting an example and making really conscious choices about
Yeah,
how you choose to deploy compute, and that is part of your DNA as a company, and for other for the public at large, and then for other enterprises to understand that can be baked into their strategy. And I think they're looking for that. I think a
yeah,
lot of them, as they look at governance and sustainability, they are really they're looking for models that they can follow. So thank you for those tidbits. And anybody who's listening, if you're not looking at Switch, me and John think you're a little crazy. All
yeah,
right. That said, so once companies are able to check that essential box and they're like, okay, yes, I'm going about this right, and I'm approaching this in a sustainable manner as possible. I think the next thing that everybody wants to do is they want to go fast. And
yeah.
so I understand recent benchmarks put Hot Isle among one of the fastest in the world. And so exciting. So what does that say about the potential for non-traditional players to compete?
Yeah, I mean, so we deployed a cluster of compute as, again, we're in this crawl, walk, run phase. So as our kind of walking mode, we deployed a cluster, and, you know, the goal has been to get as many developers onto that cluster as we can. So in the last month alone, we got over 2 dozen developers who rented a GPU and tried it out, and some are continuing on. Some are adding more GPUs. Some finish their project and move on. So it's exciting to kind of watch this flywheel kind of spin faster and faster, because when we started, frankly, nobody wanted AMD. Everybody was so tied into NVIDIA that they'd never even considered AMD. So we had very few customers to start, and now it's like progressively every month it's just growing and growing. And I think that people are starting to wake up to that need for openness and alternative solutions that are viable. So yeah, it's fun to be there from the very beginning, and it's not my first time. I was there very early on with Bitcoin mining. I ran the very first ASICs that ever came out. So yeah, and even deploying Macs and Apples into computer labs in the early 90s, when everybody was Windows. So yeah, it's kind of
That is so cool.
in my blood. Yeah.
For anybody who's listening, I am like smiling ear to ear because I am like totally geeking out
Aw,
because all the insights that you're sharing with us, this is why that you're sharing your journey at the beginning of this interview is so important, is that they understand that the insights that you're sharing are built on an incredible amount of experience. So in navigating, and I know you talked about you're focusing on the long tail and kind of decentralization and democratization and reaching the person who ordinarily wouldn't have access to this level of compute is really important to you. And then I've also talked about, that bottleneck and enterprises trying to figure it out. If they're really trying to if somebody's in an enterprise, be it large or I'm gonna go large mid-size here, and they're trying to understand the space and how complex it is. With the rise of neoclouds, like how can they make sense of it? Like where would you say Hot Isle could even fit in with an enterprise and what they're trying to accomplish?
yeah, I mean, to be honest, today it's hard for us because we're limited. We don't have an infinite supply of GPUs today. A large enterprise is gonna wanna know that they can grow their product to be 1,000 GPUs on demand, right? Like within a week, you can deploy 1,000 GPUs. We can't promise that. That's my whole focus is to build a business around what we can offer and what we can promise, given our limitations today. I'm not going for debt financing and trying to raise $100 million and secure multi-year contracts to be able to justify going into a massive amount of debt that I'll probably never be able to pay off. Like that, it's not the business that I want to run. And I think that sort of business is good. However, I think there will be a day of reckoning at some point where, any sort of contraction in the industry, which having lived on the internet since 1991, I've seen every up and down. They happen and they're going to happen again. Things expand and contract. So those companies that have sold the multi-year contracts to other companies, if those companies then have any sort of problem and decide to cancel their contract, well, now what are you propping up your debt financing with? And that becomes a bigger question of the long term sustainability of this business and this industry. And for me, I want to build a sustainable business that's going to last forever. I don't have some grandiose thing of going public or a giant exit. My vision is to just provide compute to a niche class of people that are the up and coming developers that will build their AI utility and then hopefully get a job at one of these big companies and then go use my competitors, right? Like I'm okay with that because I'm helping build that flywheel and I'm helping build this industry. And that's kind of the natural progression of things. Now, that said, I'm also working on some stuff that I can't talk about here, but it will enable me to grow at a much faster rate so that I can service probably, I'd say in the medium size business. Right now, I'm more focused small medium. I think I'll be able to get to the medium size with what I'm working on next. Again, that crawl, walk, run is so important. So that'll get us to walking and running, and then full on running, maybe on the next deployment after that. And that times itself really well with AMD's release schedule. We have the MI300X right now, which is kind of AMD's first foray into AI. They've since released a new model, which is the MI, and we're working on deploying those, purchasing a bunch and then deploying those. And then the MI400, which is AMD's next generation stuff coming sometime next year, should change the landscape quite a bit. That's where AMD becomes a lot more competitive with NVIDIA directly head on, and a lot more use cases. And by then, I'm hoping that I'll be able to basically deploy an infinite number of them. So, if we can capture some more of the market with MI355 deployment and then work with deploying MI400, I think that we can capture even more of the market. And a lot of this, again, is just building trust with developers of these smaller companies first, who then, get noticed in the industry and get jobs at these bigger companies. And when they get jobs at these bigger companies, they're going to say, hey, I had a great experience with Hot Isle. They really know how to treat their customers well, and I want to continue to use them. And I think that that path is a very sane and smart path for any business to go with. I don't want to go with the path of growing too quickly and then having to hire and fire people. I want to grow this business organically with our customer demand, and really not become that giant conglomerate that, when you need support, you're talking to somebody who doesn't know anything about you, doesn't care. They're just like trying to close trouble tickets all the time. I don't want to become that company. I want to become a company, again, with trust and openness and transparency and ethics, and something that people actually really enjoy working with. So just a very, very different trajectory than everything else I'm seeing in the industry, which is just a, explosive growth and Uber Airbnb model of try to corner the market and get all the customers before everybody else does. I see AI as just like the internet, it's this long-term, slow growth, thing that, is not going to end anytime soon. I've been living it myself for the last 30 years. Why not another 30 years of doing it with AI? I'm extremely, extremely bullish on AI. I think that it is not a fad. It is here in our lives every day. I use it myself. I write code with it. I'm a developer myself, so I understand developers' needs, and it's definitely transforming how I do everything in my day to day. So I can't see that magically going back in the box. It's out. It's just going to get better. I'm super excited for it, and I want to foster that. I want to get developers excited about it, and get people thinking, how do I build products that improve the lives of others? How cool is that? Like, that's just, and then provide the compute for that. I get to build supercomputers, which is also fantastic and fun.
Yeah, that's that's great. I can't say it enough. I just love your approach to this. And I think so many people are just, to your point, just going all in. And probably a lot of them, we're seeing the headlines, they're in over their head. It's so exciting. And I love that you said that you are bullish about it. And I know that you are, but it doesn't mean that, and it's such a good example in that you can be bullish, but you can also keep your perspective, and you can also be very considered in your approach to how you scale with AI. Because to your point, the genie's out of the bottle. This is going to be around for, this is just going to be part of life here on
Yeah.
Earth going
Yeah.
forward, the way electricity and many other things are. I love that you're very honest about who you can serve today, where you're headed, and how you're going about that. And boy, I tell you, if I were a large enterprise, I'd be waiting with bated breath for you to get there, because I'd want to work with a company like you who has really just got this great ethos and has taken such a considered approach to, who understands it's not just checking all the boxes, but it's also about how you actually grow your organization. And the thing is, John, with your background, you could do that. You could have really, you know, gone
Yeah.
all in quite a different direction. So if the large enterprises are not getting anything else from this, like, please understand that there is a considered way to go about this so that you're around in the long term.
Yeah, I do feel like, AI is so exciting and everybody's just diving head first into it. And a lot of these large enterprises don't really know what they're doing. They're making, massive plays in money and infrastructure without just doing like simple proof of concepts first, right? Like you don't need to go to a hyperscaler and rent 1,000 GPUs where your engineering is only able to make use of 10 of them, right? And I'm sure there are cases of just tons of GPUs sitting around idle, not doing anything. It'd be much more intelligent. And I know that this sounds more risky, right? Is just like do a simple proof of concept first. Like, you know, when we learned math, it was all about breaking a big problem down into a small problem and then solving the small problems first to get to the end. Because of the hype and extreme like energy around AI, these companies are just fumbling and they're not stepping back and trying to say, hey, we've got all this data. How can we make use of it? How can we better create processes in our company to use it? What sort of small experiments can we do at like very low cost? And this is actually a reason why we got rid of our 1 year contract pricing. We're a flat price. It's 199 an hour, per GPU, and we bill you by the minute. No contract, no commitment, no, talking to a sales guy and convincing anybody to use us or anything like that. It's, you can put in a credit card and go. It's like the least friction, least effort, least commitment solution that's out there today. And I think that that's really important for these big companies to actually think like, well, maybe we shouldn't be worried about, buying many millions of dollars of compute and deploying it into our own data centers. Maybe we should like talk to these smaller NeoClouds that are very hungry for your business. We will jump through every hoop to make you happy. We might screw up and you might, but at least you're saving the business a ton of money and a ton of time and a ton of energy, and potentially building something that's actually useful for people in your company. So yeah, I really, really, really want to see people take a more sane, reasoned approach to all this because at the end of the day, it's going to be really important for AI to be successful, and we'll have smaller bubble bursts, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's just we're history repeating itself in so many ways, and we're destined to repeat that. So,
It's almost like
yeah,
we can't help ourselves, John.
yeah. I mean, it's
Um,
exciting. I get it. I'm
yeah,
not against it. It's just take a step back, take a breath,
yeah.
touch
Oh, yeah.
grass,
I
go
love it.
outside
I
for a
love it.
hike.
But it's so important for enterprises to understand that that is an option. But we talked about the enterprises. I wanted to land this conversation in your space with your folks. Um, you talk about growing both infrastructure and community. That's something that you really underscore. So, how do you see scaling, or how do you balance between scaling a business and scaling a developer ecosystem? What's your approach to this?
Scaling a developer ecosystem is something that I've been doing for all of my life. It's kind of like one of those things now, it's like riding a bike. It's very natural to me because I've been working with open source and developers all over the world for the majority of my life. And even now I have, a small open source project that I've been running for 6 years. It gets like 60,000 downloads a month, and it just kind of runs on its own. And that's because I've automated the testing so we can continuously add new features or fix things and know it doesn't break people's code. And I've gotten a small group of contributors that help work with me on it. These are the ways that practicing this stuff has enabled me to just make it very just like I said, like riding a bike. It's intrinsic to my being. So the way to treat developers is very different than you would treat a CTO who's just trying to solve his problem. Developers have very special needs. They want very fast response times. They want you to be accurate in your responses. They don't want They're busy in their own jobs, and they just don't want to waste a lot of time. So by being very cognizant of developers' needs. I think that we can service them extremely quickly and efficiently. And as we hire people, we'll develop a culture around that. And I've seen other companies that do that. One company that comes to mind right now is Twilio. They automated SMS. And early on in that company, they were very focused around developers. Another company like that actually is still around today is Stripe. They automated taking credit cards online, and their product is very developer focused. And so I want to have that same focus that these sorts of companies did because it was very successful. I don't need to invent anything new here. I just need to follow playbooks that have been successful for others in the past. And I think that, like I'm doing with AMD and getting more developers interested in the product, that's just following NVIDIA's playbook, which was obviously very successful for them. And I think by approaching things differently and looking at things in a different lens that's based on all of my experience in this industry for so long, I think that, just approaching everything as smart as I can and as well thought out as I can is the way that we'll be successful and the way that AI will be successful. So yeah, community is a critical aspect in all of this. And I think we can grow 50x with the team that we have today with just 3 people without any problem. And that's, again, it's automation and it's knowing how to service the customers that we have. We have the experience.
Community is everything, and I think you're right. NVIDIA did figure that out. It's totally dev to rev is their model.
That's it.
You got to take care of the developers first. Jon, we covered a lot of territory today. I just wanted to
Yeah.
ask one last question. If there is one takeaway that you would want our audience to have about yourself, Hot Isle, and NeoCloud in general, what would it be?
Reach out to us. It really is the big one is just start a conversation with us. That's all it takes. I'm a developer. I'm not a sales guy. I'm always going to be transparent and honest and truthful with you about what we can and cannot do. So just starting that conversation to say, hey, I'm interested in compute. I don't really know what I need. I'm not going to make fun of you for asking a crazy question. I want the crazy questions. I want the dialogue. I want that community. And I want to build relationships with customers. To me, it's not just trying to sell shovels in a gold rush. To me, it's actually a much larger mission that's not all driven by money. I think a lot of people are really just too focused on the money aspect. And for me, it's more the community and the larger AI ecosystem. Um, and building AI utility. We need more applications. We started with LLMs and then we went to inference. We started training, we go to inference. Now we do reinforcement learning. What's next? There's going to be 100 more advancements that come down the line. And I don't think we're anywhere close to being done yet. So, let's have that conversation and work together to build that utility and really create value for humanity with this technology. So that's my pitch. Might be crazy, but we'll see. That's what I want to do. Yeah.
Well, it's what you are doing.
Jon, thank you for sharing your insights and experience with us. Your perspectives on accessibility, independence, and the future of AI infrastructure has certainly given us a lot to consider when it comes to the opportunities and the challenges in this space. For those of you listening, this has been The Modern Enterprise Unpacked. I'm Wallis Mills. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.